After that statement, the president appeared to be struggling to stay awake as his cabinet members went around the table and touted his accomplishments. His eyelids got heavy. He does a slight head bob. Again, we've all been there. At one point, he even appears to be holding his head with his fingers. Now, the White House said that the president was listening attentively and running the meeting. My panel is back.
Again, like you said, we've all been there. And we actually one of our photographers caught Russ Vogt, the OMB director, doodling during the meeting. So it was a very long meeting. But I do think, I mean, there's a lot more observations of his tendencies now and a little bit and more scrutiny of especially how his day goes, what his activities are, how he appears in public, especially because that was such a vital point of attack from Republicans against Joe Biden. And the White House has been really trying to get the message out there to try to dispute that narrative. Obviously, they talk a lot about the New York Times article that touched on this, and they took a pretty kind of remarkable step earlier this week of releasing those Oval Office logs that really aren't traditionally released to kind of catalog what he precisely did in a given 12-hour day. So this is something that the White House is clearly cognizant of and sensitive about.
And I'll just put up on the screen the New York Times story that you're talking about, which by all accounts really made him and people around him angry. Shorter days, signs of fatigue. Trump faces realities of aging in office. Kristen, do you think it could be that he's up all night long on social media?
Well, it certainly seemed to be the case the other night.
Yeah, or talking to Howard Lutnick at 1:45 in the morning or whatever they do.
And that's not just Howard Lutnick. We've heard from world leaders before who have said that Trump has called them in the middle of the night to say something. Johnson, we know that Speaker Johnson, that he's talked to him at 2:45 in the morning. I will say that there are often times when I'm leaving the White House at 7 o'clock and the guard is still outside the Oval, meaning that President Trump is still there. He hasn't gone to the residence yet, but all meetings are off for the day. I do think, though, going back to an earlier point about everyone being hyper aware of this, it's not just President Trump's attacks on Joe Biden. It's the way that President Trump has presented himself for the last decade, which is, I am not aging. I care about this. I am very healthy. Getting doctors around him to say he's the healthiest man that's ever lived. You know, he could live to be 200, that kind of thing. Yeah. Those things are very, very important for him. And that's why he started the meeting saying that.
But it is about his attacks. I mean, he literally coined the phrase or the term, the nickname, Sleepy Joe. If you call somebody Sleepy Joe and you either fall asleep or struggle not to fall asleep during your own cabinet meeting, you're going to get called out on it.
Perhaps you should say thank you, Joe, because the reality is if President Trump was following a younger president in office right now, as he did the first time, it would be an entirely different story. He benefits tremendously from the comparisons to Joe Biden. One thing is clear, he is aging in office. And he did say that. He said every now and then it will happen, or every once in a while will happen to everyone, but I think the reality is he doesn't have to have a cabinet meeting that's so long. So what I'm interested in, will the White House start adjusting his schedule like we saw making accommodations to Joe Biden? So far we really haven't seen that. They just are allowing him to sleep in public, but that could change.
Yeah, and it's not, of course, just the dozing off. There you can see things with his ankles being swollen, the way that he's walking. These are legitimate questions about a president's health because it's not just because it's like tabloid gossip. I mean, some of it is, but we want to know that the president can be on top of it whenever a crisis might come or whatever might be happening.
Sleep habits.
I'd be just tired.
If you're up the entire night before
I would be asleep.
Rage tweeting, then, none of us are going to be, looking like Baryshnikov the next morning dancing across the stage.
No, I would say not. President Trump likes to brag about how little sleep he needs, but we have seen this was an extreme moment. He was up very late, truth socialing, or re-truthing, or however the nomenclature is. But you're right. There's been a couple of moments down the last few weeks where he's been captured on camera appearing to doze off during public events at the White House. And this one comes, just what's interesting about the timing here is the White House, the New York Times did a story last week examining his schedule, saying he's working fewer hours than he used to. White House pushed back furiously and said, no, look, he's working all hours of the day. And he's tireless. And then yesterday he falls asleep.
Well, again, and the thing is, if you're sitting there going, oh, this must be a health problem, Caddy. I mean, I don't know that it's a health problem. Maybe it's a health problem, but chances are good it's because he was up all night rage tweeting. Like I think to me, that's the more concerning thing, that the president of the United States was up all night rage tweeting and, just spinning out one conspiracy theory after another conspiracy theory after. So it's not what happened in the daylight that was so concerning. It was what happened the night before.
Do you remember after killing Charlie Kirk, Governor Cox of Utah came out and said, put your phone down and go out and touch the grass? That's certainly not what the President of the United States was doing the night before last. I think you're right. It's the fact that he's up all night. What are you doing up all night on your phone? I mean, I like to boast about how much sleep I need.
How much sleep do you need?
I really try to get 8 hours.
Really?
Can
you get 8 hours?
Seven is if I'm pushing it. But I'm in bed so early.
I mean, 8 hours. I haven't done that since
that's
I
not
was
possible.
6 years old.
I'm up on this at midnight.
I get 8 hours per week. What about you, Richard?
7's a really good night.
7, the health. You say 8 hours was what you needed. Now they're more like 7.
I need 8.
What about you, John? You've been spending the last couple of years like actually a schedule that was as brutal or more brutal than ours. Because you're getting up for way too early. But how much sleep do you get?
I mean, during the week, I mean, it's between 5 and 6, which is not ideal. Closer to these days, closer to 6. Thank you, Katty. These days, closer to 6. Make up for it on the weekends. Try to get a little more, but there's only so late one can sleep, particularly with kids around. I know. He's napping. No.
I can't.
Well, speaking of napping,
I need to learn how. I can't do it. But Mika gets her sleep, and when she's down, she is out. It is like. Boom. I just don't.
I don't snore or anything.
No,
like
I don't either. I don't either. But I tell you, I just can't sleep. But
all right.
Mika, you were really good at it.
Well done.
No,
this
is something.
Someone else is really good at sleeping. I mean, I feel like we need to launch into the cabinet meeting story, but there's so much else going on.
Please.
I think we're gonna keep that for later. Also with us, writer at large for the New York.
No. What part of your body was the MRI looking at?
I have no idea. It was just an MRI. What part of the body? It wasn't the brain because I took a cognitive test and I aced it. I got a perfect mark, which you would be incapable of doing. Goodbye, everybody. You too.
This level of detailed assessment is standard for an executive physical at President Trump's age and confirms that he remains in excellent overall health.
Now, his doctor eventually put out a vague statement saying he was looking at Trump's heart and he is in, quote, excellent health. Trump's doctors also say he's the same height and weight as NFL quarterback Patrick Mahomes, so you could make of that what you will. The president's decline is evident in more than just anecdotal observations. New York Times recently published an extensive account of his truncated schedule and shorter work days. And again, even just watching the guy, which unfortunately for all of us here is our job to do every day, it is obvious that his behavior is becoming increasingly aberrant, strange, and sleepy. He's posting late into the night at one point about 150 times in one stretch, amplifying a post claiming that Nancy Pelosi's staff had been planning the January 6th insurrection for months. Sure, right. He's lashing out at reporters while seeming to be a kind of spectator to his own presidency.
Sir, if there's nothing incriminating in the file,
why do you blame the Biden administration? Because they let him in. Are you stupid? Are you a stupid person?
The government at the time said that CZ had caused significant harm to U.S. national security, essentially by allowing terrorist groups like Hamas to move millions of dollars around. Why did you pardon him?
Okay, are you ready? I don't know who he is.
Explain more about why you pardoned a notorious drug trafficker.
I don't know who you're talking about.
Juan Fernando.
Well, I was told that I was asked by Honduras.
There's a mic drop moment. Okay, are you ready? No idea who the guy is. Now, at some level, Trump's decline, if it's happening, it seems like it is one of those weird positions of, the food is terrible in such small portions. But the reason all this matters so much is twofold. One, it's hard to believe that this is the person who's actually running the country minute to minute, leaving us to wonder who is filling the power vacuum of the napping president, whose agendas are being implemented, right? And two, Trump's entire source of power, this is crucial, the way that he has kept his second term afloat is through this domineering monopoly on his own party, this kind of ruthless discipline he's imposed on his fellow Republicans. And that only works so long as people in the Republican Party don't start to think too hard about how long he can keep it all going.
The reason why they rushed Trump to the hospital to get that MRI and didn't want us to know why. What the doctors are saying, what experts are saying was non-routine. AKA they didn't have like, you know, a 6 months plan for this. Isn't like he went for his checkup like he probably does every year, every 6 months or whatever it is, or it's a routine piece of care he might need or something. They needed to, in a rush, get this test done, and they won't tell us why. And it's and as we've had this discussion, and Sleepy Donald has been sleepy for a while. I know it's been especially bad in the last few days. This story's really going mainstream. But a few months ago, there were other instances of this. And so after those instances, they took him to the hospital for an MRI they didn't want us to know about. And now they didn't want to tell us about it. And then they wouldn't even say which body part. Trump tried to pretend he didn't even know which body part it was that they were scanning. Right? As the man clearly has cognitive decline. Falling asleep during his own cabinet meetings, and critically, like when they were talking to him. You know, like, look, we've all dozed off in meetings before, but I've never dozed off in a meeting where I was being spoken to. You know, you're sitting in the corner of a classroom and maybe your professor's lecturing, you might get a little dozy now and then. If they're asking you questions and you're asking questions and you're being an active participant, that doesn't happen. And so, we have to ask ourselves, why did they take Trump to the hospital secretly, covertly, without transparency, to get that MRI as he's falling asleep? Is it brain damage? I don't know. The problem is, people are going to speculate. Rumors are real in politics. Scandals can be based on nothing of fact, but all conjecture. But if you're letting it cook, then you're the one letting the scandal happen.